Good morning, everybody. Bonjour tout le monde. Welcome back to Games and Gutenberg Sundays. Continuing. In Arsène Lupin versus Herlock Sholmes by Maurice Leblanc. This book is available at gutenberg.org. Chapter 5. An Abduction. Herlock Sholmes said nothing. To protest? To accuse the two men? That would be useless. In the absence of evidence, which he did not possess and had no time to seek, no one would believe him. Moreover, he was stifled with rage, but would not display his feelings before the triumphant Ganimard. So he bowed respectfully to the brothers Leroux, guardians of society, and retired. In the vestibule, he turned toward a low door which looked like the entrance to a cellar, and picked up a small red stone. It was a garnet. When he reached the street, he turned and read on the front of the house this inscription: Lucien Destange, architect, 1877. The adjoining house, number 42, bore the same inscription. Always a double passage, numbers 40 and 42, have a secret means of communication. Why didn't I think of that? I should have remained with the two policemen. He met the policemen near the corner and said to them, "Two people came out of the house, number 42, during my absence, didn't they?"
"Yes, a gentleman and lady."
Ganimard approached. Sholmes took his arm, and as they walked down the street, he said, "Monsieur Ganimard, you have a good laugh and will no doubt forgive me for the trouble I have caused you."
"Oh, there's no harm done, but it was a good joke."
"I admit that, but the best jokes have only a short life, and this one can't last much longer."
"I hope not."
"This is now the 7th day, and I can remain only 3 days more. Then I must return to London."
"Oh."
"I wish to ask you to be in readiness, as I may call on you at any hour on Tuesday or Wednesday night."
"For an expedition of the same kind as we had tonight?"
"Yes, monsieur, the very same."
"With what result?"
"The capture of Arsène Lupin," replied Sholmes.
"Do you think so?"
"I swear it, on my honor, monsieur." Sholmes bade Ganimard goodbye, and went to the nearest hotel for a few hours' sleep, after which, refreshed and with renewed confidence in himself, he returned to the Rue Chagrin, slipped 2 louis into the hand of the concierge, assured himself that the brothers Leroux had gone out, learned that the house belonged to a Monsieur Harmingat, and, provided with a candle, descended to the cellar through the low door near which he had found the garnet. At the bottom of the stairs he found another exactly like it. "I am not mistaken," he thought. "This is the means of communication. Let me see if my skeleton key will open the cellar reserved for the tenant on the ground floor. Yes, it will. Now I will examine those cases of wine. Oh, here are some places where the dust has been cleared away, and some footprints on the ground." A slight noise caused him to listen attentively. Quickly he pushed the door shut, blew out his candle, and hid behind a pile of empty wine cases. After a few seconds, he noticed that a portion of the wall swung on a pivot. The light of a lantern was thrown into the cellar. An arm appeared, then a man entered. He was bent over as if he were searching for something. He felt in the dust with his fingers, and several times he threw something into a cardboard box that he carried in his left hand. Afterward, he obliterated the traces of his footsteps, as well as the footsteps left by Lupin and the blonde lady, and he was about to leave the cellar by the same way as he had re-entered, when he uttered a harsh cry and fell to the ground. Sholmes had leaped upon him. It was the work of a moment, and in the simplest manner in the world, the man found himself stretched on the ground, bound and handcuffed. The Englishman leaned over him and said, "Have you anything to say? To tell what you know?" The man replied by such an ironical smile that Sholmes realized the futility of questioning him. So he contented himself by exploring the pockets of his captive, but he found only a bunch of keys, a handkerchief, and the small cardboard box which contained a dozen garnets similar to those which Sholmes had found. Then what was he to do with the man? Wait until his friends came to his help and deliver all of them to the police? What good would that do? What advantage would that give him over Lupin? He hesitated. But an exclamation of the box decided the question. The box bore this name and address: Lénard, jeweler, Rue de la Paix. He resolved to abandon the man to his fate. He locked the cellar and left the house. At a branch post office, he sent a telegram to Monsieur Destange, saying that he could not come that day. Then he went to see the jeweler, and, handing him the garnets, said,
"Madame sent me with these stones. She wishes to have them reset."
Sholmes had struck the right key. The jeweler replied,
Certainly, the lady telephoned me. She said she would be here today.
Sholmes established himself on the sidewalk to wait for the lady, but it was 5 o'clock when he saw a heavily veiled lady approach and enter the store. Through the window, he saw her place on the counter a piece of antique jewelry set with garnets. She went away almost immediately, walking quickly, and passed through streets that were unknown to the Englishman. As it was now almost dark, he walked close behind her and followed her into a 5-story house of double flats and, therefore, occupied by numerous tenants. At the second floor, she stopped and entered. 2 minutes later, the Englishman commenced to try the keys on the bunch he had taken from the man in the Rue Chalgrin. The 4th key fitted the lock. Notwithstanding the darkness of the rooms, he perceived that they were absolutely empty, as if unoccupied, and the various doors were standing open so that he could see all the apartments. At the end of a corridor, he perceived a ray of light, and, by approaching on tiptoe and looking through the glass door, he saw the veiled lady who had removed her hat and dress and was now wearing a velvet dressing gown. The discarded garments were lying on the only chair in the room, and a lighted lamp stood on the mantel. Then he saw her approach the fireplace and press what appeared to be the button of an electric bell. Immediately, the panel to the right of the fireplace moved and slowly glided behind the adjoining panel, thus disclosing an opening large enough for a person to pass through. The lady disappeared through this opening, taking the lamp with her. The operation was a very simple one. Sholmes adopted it and followed the lady. He found himself in total darkness, and immediately he felt his face brushed by some soft articles. He lighted a match and found that he was in a very small room, completely filled with cloaks and dresses suspended on hangers. He picked his way through until he reached a door that was draped with a portière. He peeped through, and behold, the blonde lady was there, under his eyes and almost within reach of his hand. She extinguished the lamp and turned on the electric lights. Then, for the first time, Herlock Sholmes obtained a good look at her face. He was amazed. The woman, whom he had overtaken after so much trouble and after so many tricks and maneuvers, was none other than Clotilde Destange. Clotilde Destange, the assassin of the Baron d'Autrec, and the thief who stole the blue diamond. Clotilde Destange, the mysterious friend of Arsène Lupin, and the blonde lady. Yes, I'm only a stupid ass, thought Herlock Sholmes at that moment, because Lupin's friend was a blonde and Clotilde is a brunette. I never dreamed that they were the same person. But how could the blonde lady remain a blonde after the murder of the Baron and the theft of a diamond? Sholmes could see a portion of the room. It was a boudoir, furnished with the most delightful luxury and exquisite taste, and adorned with beautiful tapestries and costly ornaments. A mahogany couch, upholstered in silk, was located on the side of the room opposite the door at which Sholmes was standing. Clotilde was sitting on this couch, motionless, her face covered by her hands. Then he perceived that she was weeping. Great tears rolled down her pale cheeks and fell, drop by drop, on the velvet corsage. The tears came thick and fast, as if their source were inexhaustible. A door silently opened behind her, and Arsène Lupin entered. He looked at her for a long time without making his presence known. Then he approached her, knelt at her feet, pressed her hand to his breast, folded her in his arms, and his actions indicated an infinite measure of love and sympathy. For a time, not a word was uttered, but her tears became less abundant. "I was so anxious to make you happy," he murmured.
I am not happy.
"No, you are crying. Your tears break my heart, Clotilde." The caressing and sympathetic tone of his voice soothed her, and she listened to him with an eager desire for hope and happiness. Her features were softened by a smile, and yet how sad a smile! He continued to speak in a tone of tender entreaty. "You should not be unhappy, Clotilde. You have no cause to be." She displayed her delicate white hands and said solemnly,
Yes, Maxime. So long as I see those hands, I shall be sad.
"Why?"
They are stained with blood.
"Hush! Do not think of that!" exclaimed Lupin. "The dead is past and gone. Do not resurrect it." And he kissed the long, delicate hand, while she regarded him with a brighter smile, as if each kiss effaced a portion of that dreadful memory.
You must love me, Maxime. You must, because no woman will ever love you as I do. For your sake, I have done many things, not at your order or request, but in obedience to your secret desires. I have done things at which my will and conscience revolted, but there was some unknown power that I could not resist. What I did involuntarily, mechanically, because it helped you, because you wished it, and I am ready to do it again tomorrow and always.
"Ah, Clotilde," he said bitterly. "Why did I draw you into my adventurous life? I should have remained the Maxime Bermond that you loved 5 years ago, and not have let you know the other man that I am." She replied in a lower voice,
I love the other man also, and I have nothing to regret.
"Yes, you regret your past life, the free and happy life you once enjoyed."
I have no regrets when you are here, she said passionately. All faults and crime disappear when I see you. When you are away, I may suffer and weep and be horrified at what I have done. But when you come, it is all forgotten. Your love wipes it all away, and I am happy again. But you must love me.
I do not love you on compulsion, Clotilde. I love you simply because I love you.
Are you sure of it?
I am just as sure of my own love as I am of yours, only my life is a very active and exciting one, and I cannot spend as much time with you as I would like just now.
What is it? Some new danger? Tell me.
Oh, nothing serious, only what? She asked. Well, he is on our track.
Who? Herlock Sholmes?
Yes, it was he who dragged Ganimard into that affair at the Hungarian restaurant. It was he who instructed the two policemen to watch the house in the Rue Charlemagne. I have no proof of it. Ganimard searched the house this morning, and Sholmes was with him. Besides...
Besides, what?
Well, there is another thing. One of our men is missing.
Who?
Géniaux.
The concierge?
Yes.
Oh, why, I sent him to the Rue Charlemagne this morning to pick up the gannets that fell out of my bush.
There is no doubt, then, that Sholmes caught him.
No. The gannets were delivered to the jeweler in the Rue de la Paix.
Then what has become of him?
Oh, Maxime, I am afraid.
There is nothing to be afraid of, but I confess this situation is very serious. What does he know? Where does he hide himself? His isolation is his strong card. I cannot reach him.
What are you going to do?
Act with extreme prudence, Clotilde. Some time ago, I decided to change my residence to a safer place, and Sholmes's appearance on the scene has prompted me to do so at once. When a man like that is on your track, you must be prepared for the worst. Well, I am making my preparations. Day after tomorrow, Wednesday, I shall move. At noon, it will be finished. At 2 o'clock, I shall leave the place, after removing the last trace of our residence there, which will be no small matter. Until then...
Well?
Until then, we must not see each other, and no one must see you, Clotilde. Do not go out. I have no fear for myself, but I have for you.
That Englishman cannot possibly reach me.
I am not so sure of that. He is a dangerous man. Yesterday I came here to search the cupboard that contains all of Monsieur Destange's old papers and records. There is danger there. There is danger everywhere. I feel that he is watching us, that he is drawing his net around us closer and closer. It is one of those intuitions which never deceive me.
In that case, Maxime, go, and think no more of my tears. I shall be brave, and will patiently, until the danger is past. Adieu, Maxime.
They held one another for some time in a last fond embrace, and it was she that gently pushed him outside. Sholmes could hear the sound of their voices in the distance. Emboldened by the necessities of the situation and the urgent need of bringing his investigation to a speedy termination, Sholmes proceeded to make an examination of the house in which he now found himself. He passed through Clotilde's boudoir into a corridor, at the end of which there was a stairway leading to the lower floor. He was about to descend this stairway when he heard voices below, which caused him to change his route. He followed the corridor, which was a circular one, and discovered another stairway, which he descended, and found himself amidst surroundings that bore a familiar appearance. He passed through a door that stood partly open, and entered a large circular room. It was Monsieur Destange's library.
"Ah, splendid!" he exclaimed. "Now I understand everything. The boudoir of Mademoiselle Clotilde, the blonde lady, communicates with a room in the adjoining house, and that house does not front on the Place Malesherbes, but upon an adjacent street, the Rue Montchanin, if I remember the name correctly. And I now understand how Clotilde Destange can meet her lover, and at the same time create the impression that she never leaves the house. And I understand also how Arsène Lupin was enabled to make his mysterious entrance to the gallery last night. Ah, there must be another connection between the library and the adjoining room. One more house full of ways that are dark, and no doubt Lucien Destange was the architect as usual. I should take advantage of this opportunity to examine the contents of the cupboard, and perhaps learn the location of other houses with secret passages constructed by Monsieur Destange.
Sholmes ascended to the gallery and concealed himself behind some draperies, where he remained until late in the evening. At last, a servant came and turned off the electric lights. An hour later, the Englishman, by the light of his lantern, made his way to the cupboard. As he had surmised, it contained the architect's old papers, plans, specifications, and books of account. It also contained a series of registers, arranged according to date, and Sholmes, having selected those of the most recent dates, searched in the indexes for the name Armenghiat. He found it in one of the registers with a reference to page 63. Turning to that page, he read, Armenghiat, 40 Rue Chalgrin. This was followed by a detailed account of the work done in and about the installation of a furnace in the house. And in the margin of the book, someone had written these words, See account MB.
Ah, I thought so, said Sholmes. The account MB is the one I want. I shall learn from it the actual residence of Monsieur Lupin.
It was morning before he found that important account. It comprised 16 pages, one of which was a copy of the page on which was described the work done for Monsieur Armenghiat of the Rue Chalgrin. Another page described the work performed for Monsieur Vatinel as owner of the house of number 25 Rue Clapeyron. Another page was reserved for the Baron d'Autrec, 134 Avenue Henri Martin. Another was devoted to the Chateau de Crozon, and the 11 other pages to various owners of houses in Paris. Sholmes made a list of those 11 names and addresses, after which he returned the books to their proper places, opened a window, jumped out onto the deserted street, and closed the shutters behind him. When he reached his room at the hotel, he lighted his pipe with all the solemnity with which he was wont to characterize that act, and amidst clouds of smoke, he studied the deductions that might be drawn from the account of M.B., or rather, from the account of Maxime Bermond, alias Arsène Lupin. At 8 o'clock, he sent the following message to Ganimard. I expect to pass through the Rue Pergolese this forenoon, and will inform you of a person whose arrest is of the highest importance. In any event, be at home tonight and tomorrow until noon, and have at least 30 men at your service. Then he engaged an automobile at the stand of the boulevard, choosing one whose chauffeur looked good-natured but dull-witted, and instructed him to drive to the Place Malesherbes, where he stopped him about 100 feet from Monsieur Destange's house. My boy, close your carriage, he said to the chauffeur. Turn up the collar of your coat, for the wind is cold, and wait patiently. At the end of an hour and a half, crank your machine. When I return, we will go to the Rue Pergolese. As he was ascending the steps leading to the door, a doubt entered his mind. Was it not a mistake on his part to be spending his time on the affairs of the blonde lady, while Arsène Lupin was preparing to move? Would he not be better engaged in trying to find the abode of his adversary amongst the 11 houses on his list? Ah, he exclaimed, when the blonde lady becomes my prisoner, I shall be master of the situation. And he rang the bell. Monsieur Destange was already in the library. They had been working only a few minutes when Clotilde entered, bade her father good morning, entered the adjoining parlor, and sat down to write. From his place, Sholmes could see her leaning over the table and, from time to time, absorbed in deep meditation. After a short time, he picked up a book and said to Monsieur Destange, "Here's a book that Mademoiselle Destange asked me to bring her when I found it." He went into the little parlor, stood before Clotilde in such a manner that her father could not see her, and said, "I am Monsieur Stickman, your father's new secretary."
Ah,
said Clotilde, without moving.
my father has changed his secretary. I didn't know it.
"Yeah, mademoiselle, and I desire to speak with you."
Kindly take a seat, monsieur. I have finished.
She added a few words to her letter, signed it, enclosed it in the envelope, sealed it, pushed her writing material away, rang the telephone, got in communication with her dressmaker, asked the latter to hasten with the completion of a traveling dress, as she required it at once, and then, turning to Sholmes, she said,
I am at your service, monsieur, but do you wish to speak before my father? Would not that be better?
"No, mademoiselle, and I beg of you, do not raise your voice. It is better that Monsieur Destange should not hear us."
For whose sake is it better?
"Yours, mademoiselle."
I cannot agree to hold any conversation with you that my father may not hear.
"But you must agree to this. It is imperative." Both of them arose, eye to eye. She said,
Speak, monsieur.
Still standing, he commenced, "You will be so good as to pardon me as if I am mistaken on certain points of secondary importance. I will guarantee, however, the general accuracy of my statements."
Can we not dispense with these preliminaries, monsieur, or are they necessary?
Sholmes felt the young woman was on her guard, so he replied, "Very well, I will come to the point. 5 years ago, your father made the acquaintance of a certain young man called Maxime Beaumont, who was introduced as a contractor or an architect. I am not sure which it was, but it was one or the other. Monsieur Destange took a liking to the young man, and as the state of his health compelled him to retire from active business, he entrusted to Monsieur Beaumont the execution of certain orders he had received from some of his old customers, and which seemed to come within the scope of Monsieur Beaumont's ability." Herlock Sholmes stopped. It seemed to him that the girl's pallor had increased, yet there was not the slightest tremor in her voice when she said,
I know nothing about the circumstances to which you refer, monsieur, and I do not see in what way they can interest me.
"In this way, mademoiselle, you know as well as I that Maxime Beaumont is also known by the name of Arsène Lupin." She laughed and said,
Nonsense! Arsène Lupin? Maxime Beaumont is Arsène Lupin? Oh no, it is impossible.
I have the honor to inform you of that fact, and since you refuse to understand my meaning, I will add that Arsène Lupin has found in this house a friend, more than a friend, and accomplice, blindly and passionately devoted to him. Without emotion, or at least with so little emotion that Sholmes was astonished at her self-control, she declared,
I do not understand your object, monsieur, and I do not care to, but I command you to say no more and leave this house.
"I have no intention of forcing my presence on you, replied Sholmes, with equal sang-froid. But I shall not leave this house alone.
And who will accompany you, monsieur?
You will.
I?
Yes, mademoiselle, we will leave this house together, and you will follow me without one word of protest. A strange feature of the foregoing interview was the absolute coolness of the two adversaries. It bore no resemblance to an implacable duel between two powerful wills, but, judging solely from their attitude and the tone of their voices, an onlooker would have supposed their conversation to be nothing more serious than a courteous argument over some impersonal object. Clotilde resumed her seat without deigning to reply to the last remark of Herlock Sholmes, except by a shrug of her shoulders. Sholmes looked at his watch and said, "It's 10:30. We will leave here in 5 minutes."
Perhaps.
If not, I shall go to Monsieur Destange and tell him.
What?
The truth. I will tell him of the vicious life of Maxime Beaumont, and I will tell him of the double life of his accomplice.
Of his accomplice?
Yes, of the woman known as the blonde lady, of the woman who was blonde.
What proofs will you give him?
I will take him to the Rue Chagrin and show him the secret passage made by Arsène Lupin's workmen, while doing the work of which he had the control, between the houses numbered 40 and 42. The passage which you and he used 2 nights ago.
Well?
I will then take Monsieur Destange to the house of Monsieur Detinon. We will descend the servants' stairway which was used by you and Arsène Lupin when you escaped from Ganimard, and we will search together the means of communication with the adjoining house, which fronts on the Boulevard des Batignolles, and not upon the Rue Clapeyron.
Well?
I will take Monsieur Destange to the Château de Crozon, and it will be easy for him, who knows the nature of the work performed by Arsène Lupin in the restoration of the chateau, to discover the secret passages constructed there by his workmen. It will thus be established that those passages allowed the blonde lady to make a nocturnal visit to the Countess's room and take those passages and take the blue diamond from the mantle, and 2 weeks later, by similar means, to enter the room of Herr Bleichen and conceal the blue diamond in his tooth powder. A strange action, I confess. A woman's revenge, perhaps, but I don't know and I don't care.
Well?
After that, said Herlock Sholmes in a more serious tone, I will take Monsieur Destange to 134 Avenue Henri Martin, and we will learn how the Baron d'Hautrec—
No, keep quiet, stammered the girl, struck with a sudden terror. I forbid you. You dared to say that it was I. You accuse me?
I accuse you of having killed the Baron d'Hautrec.
No, it is a lie.
You killed the Baron d'Hautrec, mademoiselle. You entered his service under the name of Antoinette Breha, for the purpose of stealing the blue diamond, and you killed him.
Keep quiet, monsieur, she implored him. Since you know so much, you must know that I did not murder the Baron.
I did not say that you murdered him, mademoiselle. Baron d'Hautrec was subject to fits of insanity that only Sister Auguste could control. She told me so herself. In her absence, he must have attacked you. and in the course of the struggle you struck him in order to save your own life. Frightened at your awful situation, you ran the bell and fled without even taking the blue diamond from the finger of your victim. A few minutes later, you returned with one of Arsène Lupin's accomplices, who was a servant in the adjoining house. You placed the Baron on the bed, you put the room in order, but you were afraid to take the blue diamond. Now, I have told you what happened on that night. I repeat, you did not murder the Baron, and yet it was your hand that struck the blow. She had crossed them over her forehead, those long, delicate white hands, and kept them thus for a long time. At last, loosening her fingers, she said in a voice rent by anguish,
"And what do you intend to tell? Do you intend to tell all that to my father?"
Yes, and I will tell him that I have secured as witnesses Mademoiselle Gerbois, who will recognize the blonde lady, Sister Auguste, who will recognize Antoinette Brehat, and the Countess de Crozon, who will recognize Madame de Réal. That is what I shall tell them.
"You will not dare,"
she said, recovering her self-possession in the face of an immediate peril. He arose and made a step toward the library. Clotilde stopped him.
"One moment, monsieur."
She paused, reflected a moment, and then, perfect mistress of herself, said,
"You are Herlock Sholmes?"
"Yes."
"What do you want of me?"
"What do I want? I am fighting a duel with Arsène Lupin, and I must win. The contest is now drawing to a climax, and I have an idea that a hostage as precious as you will give me an important advantage over my adversary. Therefore, you will follow me, mademoiselle. I will entrust you to one of my friends. As soon as the duel is ended, you will be set at liberty."
"Is that all?"
"That is all. I do not object. I do not belong to the police service of this country, and consequently I do not consider that I am under any obligation to cause your arrest." She appeared to have come to a decision, yet she required a momentary respite. She closed her eyes, the better to concentrate her thoughts. Sholmes looked at her in surprise. She was now so tranquil and apparently indifferent to the dangers which threatened her. Sholmes thought, does she believe that she is in danger? Probably not, since Lupin protects her. She has confidence in him. She believes that Lupin is omnipotent and infallible. "Mademoiselle," he said, "I told you that we would leave here in 5 minutes. That time has almost expired."
"Will you permit me to go to my room, monsieur, to get some necessary articles?"
"Certainly, mademoiselle, and I will wait for you in the Rue Montchanin. Genial, the concierge, is a friend of mine."
"Ah, you know?"
she said, visibly alarmed. "I know many things."
"Very well, I will ring for the maid."
The maid brought her hat and jacket. Then Sholmes said, "You must give Monsieur Destange some reason for our departure, and, if possible, let your excuse serve for an absence of several days."
"That shall not be necessary. I shall be back very soon."
They exchanged defiant glances and an ironic smile. "What faith you have in him," said Sholmes.
"Absolute."
"He does everything well, doesn't he? He succeeds in everything he undertakes, and whatever he does receives your approval and cooperation."
"I love him,"
she said, with a touch of passion in her voice. And you think that he will save you?" She shrugged her shoulders, and, approaching her father, she said,
I am going to deprive you of Monsieur Stickman. We are going to the National Library. You will return for luncheon? Perhaps. No, I think not. But don't be uneasy.
Then she said to Sholmes in a firm voice,
I am at your service, monsieur.
"Absolutely."
Quite so.
"I warn you that if you attempt to escape, I shall call the police and have you arrested. Do not forget that the blonde lady is on parole."
I give you my word of honor that I shall not attempt to escape.
"I believe you. Now let us go."
They left the house together, as he had predicted. The automobile was standing where Sholmes had left it. As they approached it, Sholmes could hear the rumbling of the motor. He opened the door, asked Clotilde to enter, and took a seat beside her. The machine started at once, gained the exterior boulevards, the Avenue Hoche, and the Avenue de la Grande Armée. Sholmes was considering his plans. He thought,
Ganimard is at home. I shall leave the girl in his care. Shall I tell him who she is? No. He would take her to prison at once, and that would spoil everything. When I am alone, I can consult my list of addresses taken from the account MB and run them down. Tonight, or tomorrow morning at the latest, I shall go to Ganimard, as I agreed, and deliver into his hands Arsène Lupin and all his band. He rubbed his hand gleefully at the thought that his duel with Lupin was drawing to a close, and he could not see any serious obstacle in the way of his success. And, yielding to an irrepressible desire to give vent to his feelings, an unusual desire on his part, he exclaimed, Excuse me, mademoiselle, if I am unable to conceal my satisfaction and delight. The battle has been a difficult one, and my success is, therefore, more enjoyable.
A legitimate success, monsieur, of which you have a just right to be proud.
Thank you. But where are we going? The chauffeur must have misunderstood my directions. At that moment, as they were leaving Paris by the gate de Neuilly, that was strange, as the Rue Pergolese is not outside the fortifications. Sholmes lowered the glass and said, Chauffeur, you have made a mistake. Rue Pergolese. The man made no reply. Sholmes repeated in a louder voice, I told you to go to the Rue Pergolese. Still, the man did not reply. Ah, but you are deaf, my friend. Or is he doing it on purpose? We are very much out of our way. Rue Pergolese. Turn back at once. Rue Pergolese. The chauffeur made no sign of having heard the order. The Englishman fretted with impatience. He looked at Clotilde. A mysterious smile played upon her lips. Why do you laugh? He said. It is an awkward mistake, but it won't help you. Oh, of course not, she replied. Then an idea occurred to him. He rose and made a careful scrutiny of the chauffeur. His shoulders were not so broad, his bearing was not so stiff and mechanical. A cold perspiration covered his forehead, and his hands clenched with sudden fear, as his mind was seized with the conviction that the chauffeur was Arsène Lupin. Well, Monsieur Sholmes, what do you think of our little ride? Delightful, monsieur. Really delightful, replied Sholmes. Never in his life had he experienced so much difficulty in uttering a few simple words without a tremor, or without betraying his feelings in his voice, but Quickly, by a sort of reaction, a flood of hatred and rage burst its bounds, overcame his self-control, and brusquely drawing his revolver, he pointed it at Mademoiselle Destange. "Lupin, stop this minute, this second, or I fire at Mademoiselle." "I advise you to aim at the cheek if you wish to hit the temple," replied Lupin, without turning his head.
"Maxime, don't go so fast," said Clotilde. "The pavement is slippery, and I am very timid."
She was smiling. Her eyes were fixed on the pavement, over which the carriage was traveling at enormous speed. Let him stop, said Sholmes to her, wild with rage. "I warn you that I am desperate." The barrel of the revolver brushed the waving locks of her hair. She replied calmly,
"Maxime is so imprudent. He is going so fast. I am really afraid of some accident."
Sholmes returned the weapon to his pocket and seized the handle of the door, as if to alight, despite the absurdity of such an act. Clotilde said to him,
"Be careful, monsieur. There is an automobile behind us."
He leaned over. There was an automobile close behind, a large machine of formidable aspect with its sharp prow and bloody red body, and holding 4 men clad in fur coats. "Ah, I am well guarded," thought Sholmes. "I may as well be patient." He folded his arms around his chest with that proud air of submission so frequently assumed by heroes when fate has turned against them. And while they crossed the river Seine and rushed through Suresnes, Rueil, and Château, motionless and resigned, controlling his actions and his passions, he tried to explain to his own satisfaction by what miracle Arsène Lupin had substituted himself for the chauffeur. It was quite improbable that the honest-looking fellow he had selected on the boulevard that morning was an accomplice placed there in advance. And yet Arsène Lupin had received a warning in some way, and it must have been after he, Sholmes, had approached Clotilde in the house, because no one could have suspected his project prior to that time. Since then, Sholmes had not allowed Clotilde out of his sight. Then an idea struck him. The telephone communication desired by Clotilde and her conversation with the dressmaker. Now it was all clear, quite clear, to him. Even before he had spoken to her, simply upon his request to speak to her as the new secretary of Monsieur Destange, she had scented the danger, surmised the name and purpose of the visitor, and calmly, naturally, as if she were performing a commonplace action of her everyday life, she had called Arsène Lupin to her assistance by some preconcerted signal. How Arsène Lupin had come and caused himself to be substituted for the chauffeur were matters of trifling importance. That which affected Sholmes, even to the point of appeasing his fury, was the recollection of that incident whereby an ordinary woman, a sweetheart, it is true, mastering her nerves, controlling her features, and subjugating the expression of her eyes, had completely deceived the astute detective Herlock Sholmes. How difficult to overcome an adversary who is aided by such confederates and who, by the mere force of his authority, inspires in a woman so much courage and strength. They crossed the Seine and climbed the hill at Saint-Germain, but some 500 meters beyond that town, the automobile slackened its speed. The other automobile advanced, and the two stopped side by side. There was no one else in the neighborhood. "Monsieur Sholmes," said Lupin, "kindly exchange to the other machine. Ours is really a slow one." "Indeed," said Sholmes calmly, convinced that he had no choice. "Also, permit me to loan you a fur coat, as we will travel quite fast and the air is cool, and accept a couple of sandwiches, as we cannot tell when we will dine." The four men alighted from the other automobile. One of them approached, and as he raised his goggles, Sholmes recognized in him the gentleman in the frock coat that he had seen at the Hungarian restaurant. Lupin said to him, "You will return this machine to the chauffeur from whom I hired it. He is waiting in the first wine shop to the right as you go up the Rue Legendre. You will give him the balance of the 1,000 francs I promised him. Ah, yes, kindly give your goggles to Monsieur Sholmes." He talked to Mademoiselle Destange for a moment, then took his place at the wheel and started, with Sholmes at his side and one of his men behind him. Lupin had not exaggerated when he said, "We will travel quite fast." From the beginning, he set a breakneck pace. The horizon rushed to meet them, as if attracted by some mysterious force, and disappeared instantly as though swallowed up in an abyss into which many other things, such as trees, houses, fields, and forests, were hurled with the tumultuous fury and haste of a torrent as it approached the cataract. Sholmes and Lupin did not exchange a word. Above their heads, the leaves of the poplars made a great noise like the waves of the sea, rhythmically arranged by the regular spacing of the trees, and the towns swept by like specters. Monteil, Vernon, Gaillon, from one hill to the other, from Bon Secours to Contileux, Rouen, its suburbs, its harbor, its miles of wharves. Rouen seemed like the straggling street of a country village. And this was Duclair, Clodebec, the country of Caux, which they skimmed over in their terrific flight, and Lillebon and Quillebeuf. Then, suddenly, they found themselves on the banks of the Seine, at the extremity of a little wharf, beside which lay a staunch sea-going yacht that emitted great volumes of black smoke from its funnel. The automobile stopped. In 2 hours, they had traveled over 40 leagues. A man, wearing a blue uniform and gold-laced cap, came forward and saluted. Lupin said to him, "All ready, Captain. Did you receive my telegram?"
"Yes, I got it."
"Is the Swallow ready?"
"Yes, monsieur."
"Come, Monsieur Sholmes." The Englishman looked around, saw a couple of people on the terrace in front of a cafe, hesitated a moment, then realized that before he could secure any assistance, he would be seized, carried aboard, and placed in the bottom of the hold. He crossed the gangplank and followed Lupin into the captain's cabin. It was quite a large room, scrupulously clean, and presented a cheerful appearance with its varnished woodwork and polished brass. Lupin closed the door and addressed Sholmes abruptly and almost rudely as he said, "Well, what do you know?" "Everything." "Everything? Come, be precise." His voice contained no longer that polite, if ironical tone, which he had affected when speaking to the Englishman. Now his voice had the imperious tone of a master, accustomed to command and accustomed to be obeyed, even by a Herlock Sholmes. They measured each other by their looks, enemies now, open and implacable foes. Lupin spoke again, but in a milder tone. "I have grown weary of your pursuit, and do not intend to waste any more time in avoiding the traps you lay for me. I warn you that my treatment of you will depend on your reply. Now, what do you know?" "Everything, monsieur." Arsène Lupin controlled his temper and said in a jerky manner, "I will tell you what you know. You know that, under the name of Maxime Bermond, I have improved 15 houses that were originally constructed by Monsieur Destange. Yes. Of those 15 houses, you have seen 4. Yes. And you have a list of the other 11. Yes. You made that list at Monsieur Destange's house on that night, no doubt? Yes. And you have an idea that amongst those 11 houses, there is one that I have kept for the use of myself and my friends, and you have entrusted to Ganimard the task of finding my retreat. No. What does that signify? It signifies that I choose to act alone and do not want his help. Then I have nothing to fear, since you are in my hands. You have nothing to fear as long as I remain in your hands. You mean that you will not remain? Yes. Arsène Lupin approached the Englishman and, placing his hand on the latter's shoulder, said, "Listen, monsieur, I am not in a humor to argue with you, and unfortunately for you, you are not in a position to choose. So let us finish our business." "Very well. You are going to give me your word of honor that you will not try to escape from this boat until you arrive in English waters." "I shall give you my word of honor that I shall escape if I have an opportunity," replied the indomitable Sholmes. "But, sapristi, you know quite well that at a word from me, you would soon be rendered helpless. All these men will obey me blindly. At a sign from me, they would place you in irons. Irons can be broken. And throw you overboard 10 miles from shore. I can swim." "I hadn't thought of that," said Lupin with a laugh. "Excuse me, master, and let us finish. You will agree that I must take the measures necessary to protect myself and my friends." "Certainly, but they will be useless." "And yet you do not wish me to take them." "It is your duty." "Very well, then." Lupin opened the door and called the captain and 2 sailors. The latter seized the Englishman, bound him hand and foot, and tied him to the captain's bunk. "That will do," said Lupin. "It was only on account of your obstinacy and the unusual gravity of the situation that I ventured to offer you this indignity." The sailors retired. Lupin said to the captain, "Let one of the crew remain here to look after Monsieur Sholmes, and you can give him as much of your own company as possible. Treat him with all due respect and consideration. He is not a prisoner, but a guest. What time have you, Captain?" 5 minutes after 2. Lupin consulted his watch, then looked at the clock that was attached to the wall of the cabin. 5 minutes past 2 is right. How long will it take you to reach Southampton? 9 hours, easygoing. Make it 11. You must not land there until after the departure of the midnight boat, which reaches Havre at 8 o'clock in the morning. Do you understand, Captain? Let me repeat, as it would be very dangerous for all of us to permit Monsieur to return by France by that boat, you must not reach Southampton before 1 o'clock in the morning." "I understand." "Au revoir, master. Next year, in this world or in the next?" "Until tomorrow," replied Sholmes. A few minutes later, Sholmes heard the automobile going away, and, at the same time, the steam puffed violently in the depths of the Swallow. The boat had started for England. About 3 o'clock, the vessel left the mouth of the river and plunged into the open sea. At that moment, Sholmes was lying on the captain's bunk, sound asleep. Next morning, it being the 10th and last day of the duel between Sholmes and Lupin, the Echo de France published this interesting bit of news. "Yesterday, a judgment of ejectment was entered in the case of Arsène Lupin against Herlock Sholmes, the English detective. Although signed at noon, the judgment was executed the same day. At 1 o'clock this morning, Sholmes was landed at Southampton. Chapter 5. An Abduction of Arsène Lupin vs. Herlock Sholmes by Maurice Leblanc. This book is available at Gutenberg.org. Thank you for joining. Have a great rest of the day.